My name is Dr. Elias Harlow. The doctors at McMurdo Station tell me I'm recovering well, all things considered. The frostbite took 2 of my fingers and part of my left ear, but I should be grateful, that's what they keep saying. You should be grateful, Dr. Harlow. No one has ever survived exposure that long in those conditions. They don't understand that survival was my curse. I've decided to record everything that happened at Research Station 16. The official investigation dismissed my account as the ravings of a man suffering from hypothermia and trauma. They've listed 7 deaths and 1 missing person in their report. Just another Antarctic tragedy, they said. Just the continent claiming more lives as it has for a century. But I know the truth. Something ancient stirred beneath that ice, something that had been sleeping for millions of years until we were foolish enough to disturb it, and I fear our interference has only hastened its awakening. No one believed me then, maybe no one will believe me now, but it's still down there, and it's waking up. The Twin Otter's engines howled against the Antarctic wind as we approached Research Station 16. Through the small window, I watched the endless white landscape rushing beneath us, occasionally broken by jagged crevasses of deep blue. After 3 days delayed at McMurdo due to weather, I was eager to begin my work. First time on the ice. The pilot's voice crackled through my headset. "3rd season," I replied, "but my first at an isolated outpost." He nodded, eyes hidden behind mirrored aviators. Different beast altogether. McMurdo might feel remote, but it's practically civilization compared to where you're headed. 16 is about as far out as we put people these days. As we descended, the station came into view, a cluster of red modular buildings partially embedded in the ice shelf, with a tall communications array rising from the center. Several smaller outbuildings connected by enclosed walkways created a rough star pattern. The whole complex looked tiny against the vastness of Antarctica. "Home sweet home for the next 6 months," the pilot said as we touched down on the packed snow runway. The cold hit me like a physical force when the aircraft door opened. Even through my extreme weather gear, the wind found ways to steal the warmth from my body. I pulled my goggles down and trudged toward the figure waving from the entrance to the main building. "Dr. Harlow," the woman's voice carried despite the wind. "Hurry inside, before you freeze solid." The airlock door sealed behind me with a hydraulic hiss, and blessed warmth enveloped me as I removed my outer layers. "Victoria Winslow," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Station Chief, welcome to the edge of nowhere." Dr. Winslow was tall with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, crow's feet around intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. Her handshake was firm, authoritative. "The rest of the team is eager to meet you," she continued, leading me through a narrow corridor. "We've been short-handed in your department since the accident." "Accident?" I asked, suddenly concerned. She paused briefly. "Your predecessor had a fall during an ice shelf survey. Nothing to do with the core work you'll be handling." Her tone made it clear the subject was closed. The central hub of Station 16 was a combined dining and common area. 6 people looked up as we entered, conversations pausing. "Everyone, this is Dr. Elias Harlow, our new glaciologist and ice core specialist," Winslow announced. "He'll be taking over Sheffield's projects." A stocky man with a thick beard approached first. "Benjamin Hayes, microbiologist. Glad to have you aboard. The ice samples you'll be pulling are giving us some fascinating extremophile data." One by one, the others introduced themselves. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a soft-spoken geologist with 3 previous Antarctic expeditions under his belt. Dr. Lucia Reyes, meteorologist, whose rapid speech contrasted with her methodical work. Wesley Griffin, the station's engineer, a former Navy man with tattooed forearms and a booming laugh. Dr. Diana Foster, physician and the team's only medical support. And finally, Oliver Bennett, communications specialist, whose friendly demeanor and immediate offer to help me settle in made him an instant ally. "We eat at 1900, Winslow informed me. "Bennett will show you to your quarters. Orientation briefing in my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow." My quarters were Spartan but comfortable. A small bedroom with attached workspace, barely large enough for a narrow bed, desk, and storage for personal effects. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the constant mechanical hum of the station's life support systems. "The noise takes some getting used to," Bennett remarked, noticing my attention to the sound. "But after a week, you'll only notice when it stops, which is when you should worry." "How long have you been here?" I asked, unpacking my equipment. 4 months, longest stint I've done." He leaned against the doorframe. "Most of us have been here at least that long. You're the new blood." "What happened to Sheffield really?" I asked directly. Bennett's easy smile faltered. "Officially, he fell into a crevasse during a routine survey. Unofficially, nobody knows for sure. He went out alone, which was against protocol. Search team found his equipment, but not him." He shrugged. "Antarctica doesn't always give up its dead." That night at dinner, I began to get a sense of the team dynamics. Hayes and Nakamura were deep in a friendly argument about sediment patterns. Griffin entertained Dr. Foster with outlandish stories from his Navy days. Winslow ate efficiently while reviewing data on a tablet. Reyes kept glancing toward the windows, where darkness had fallen, seeming uneasy with the perpetual night of Antarctic winter. "How deep are you drilling now?" I asked Hayes during a lull in conversation. "Just over 3,000 meters, he replied, eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "But with your expertise, we're hoping to push past 3,500. The ice at that depth is over 400,000 years old. Imagine what we might find preserved there." "Like what exactly?" I asked. Hayes and Winslow exchanged a quick glance that I almost missed. "Ancient microbiota, atmospheric gas samples from eras we can only theorize about," Hayes said quickly. "The usual treasure trove, but older than we've ever accessed before." Later that night, alone in my quarters, I reviewed the project files. Station 16's official mission was to extract and analyze ice cores from unprecedented depths, providing climate data from before human civilization. Standard research, though the funding levels seemed unusually high for such work. Before sleep, I stepped into the observation dome, a small glass bubble on the station's roof that offered a clear view of the Antarctic sky. The aurora australis painted ghostly green ribbons across the stars. In the distance, the ice shelf stretched to the horizon, a desolate beauty that humbled and terrified simultaneously. For the first time, I truly felt the isolation of our position. 230 miles from McMurdo, the nearest outpost of humanity in this frozen desert. As I turned to leave, a movement on the ice caught my eye, a shadow passing quickly at the edge of the illuminated perimeter. I pressed closer to the glass, straining to see, but there was nothing but wind-blown snow. A trick of the light, I told myself. Nothing lives out there during winter, nothing could. I returned to my quarters, but sleep came fitfully. The station's sounds were different than I expected. Beneath the mechanical hum lay subtle creaks and groans, as though the ice itself were shifting around us. Occasionally, I could have sworn I heard something else, a deeper vibration, almost like a heartbeat, coming from far below. The drilling operations occupied the largest of the outbuildings, connected to the main complex by a long, enclosed walkway. My first sight of the massive drill assembly was impressive, a technological marvel designed to extract pristine cylindrical cores of ice from the depths of the Antarctic shelf. "Our baby can pull cores up to 15 centimeters in diameter," Griffin explained proudly as he showed me around the facility, custom built for this project. The heating element prevents refreezing during extraction, and the entire chamber is kept at -30 Celsius to preserve sample integrity. For 2 weeks, I settled into the rhythm of station life. My days were filled with analyzing the most recently extracted cores, cataloging gas bubbles and particulate matter trapped in the ancient ice. The work was precise and absorbing, allowing me to almost forget our isolation. Almost. There were small oddities I couldn't quite explain, equipment that had been moved overnight, unexplained power fluctuations that Griffin attributed to thermal expansion messing with the generators, the strange acoustics of the station that sometimes carried whispers through the ventilation system, whispers that stopped when you tried to locate their source. The team had developed the close-knit dynamics common to isolated research groups. Hayes and Nakamura frequently collaborated, their specialties complementing each other. Bennett kept morale up with his easy humor and occasional movie nights in the common area. Dr. Foster maintained a professional distance but was quick to address any health concerns. Reyes had a nervous energy about her, constantly checking atmospheric readings as though expecting catastrophic change. And always, Dr. Winslow watched over everything with sharp eyes that missed nothing. It was on my 17th day at Station 16 that everything changed. I was monitoring the drill telemetry with Hayes when the sensors indicated we had reached 3,510 meters, deeper than any previous Antarctic ice core. "We're making history today, Harlow," Hayes said, clapping me on the shoulder. His excitement was infectious. When the core sample finally emerged from the extraction chamber, the entire team gathered to witness its reveal. The cylindrical tube of ice, a time capsule from nearly 500,000 years ago, was carefully transferred to the analysis lab. As we examined the core under controlled conditions, Nakamura noticed it first. A dark inclusion about 10 centimeters long near the center of the sample. "That's unusual," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Ice at this depth should be relatively homogeneous." Using specialized tools, we carefully extracted the anomalous section for closer inspection. Under the microscope, the dark matter revealed itself to be organic in composition, frozen tissue of some kind, preserved for countless millennia. "This is extraordinary," Hayes whispered, his face inches from the microscope. "These cells appear to have complex structures unlike any extremophile we've documented." Winslow immediately implemented containment protocols, limiting access to the specimen to Hayes, myself, and Nakamura. The biologists set up cultures, attempting to isolate viable material from the ancient tissue. That evening, as I recorded my observations, the lights flickered throughout the station. The reserve generators kicked in immediately, but several sensitive instruments had already shut down, requiring careful recalibration. "Third time this week," Griffin grumbled as he checked the electrical systems. "Something's draining power from the grid, but I can't pinpoint the source." That night, I had my first nightmare. In it, I was suspended in a vast darkness, neither cold nor warm, simply nothing. Yet within that nothing, I sensed a presence, ancient and patient, watching me through the void. I felt its curiosity, its hunger, and most terrifyingly, its awakening awareness. I tried to retreat, to hide my thoughts from its probing tendrils, but it followed effortlessly, as though my fear were a beacon. I woke gasping, sheets soaked with sweat despite the room's chill. The station hummed around me, but beneath that familiar sound, I could have sworn I heard something else, a deep, rhythmic pulsing coming from far below the ice. The next morning, Hayes burst into the common area during breakfast, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept. "The cultures," he said breathlessly, "they're growing, the cells from the sample, they're viable." "That's impossible," Foster objected. "Nothing could survive that long, even in suspended animation." "Impossible or not, I've got cellular activity," Hayes insisted. "You need to see this." In the lab, we crowded around his microscope. The tissue sample, now partially thawed under controlled conditions, showed unmistakable signs of metabolic activity. More disturbing were the structural changes occurring in real time. The cells appeared to be reorganizing, communicating through some unknown mechanism. "It's like they're networking," Hayes said, his scientific detachment giving way to wonder, "forming new connections. I've never seen anything like it." "Could it be contamination?" Winslow asked sharply, "something we introduced during extraction." Hayes shook his head firmly. The containment protocols were perfect. Besides, this doesn't match any known terrestrial microorganism. The cellular structure is fundamentally different. "Different how?" I asked, unease growing in my stomach. "The membranes aren't discrete, they're permeable in ways that shouldn't be possible, and the nucleic material is unlike any DNA or RNA we've classified." He looked up, eyes shining with the excitement of discovery. "We may have found an entirely new domain of life." Winslow ordered heightened biosecurity measures and daily reports on the specimen's development. Privately, she pulled me aside after the meeting. "Keep an eye on Hayes," she said quietly. "His enthusiasm might cloud his judgment." "You're worried about contamination?" I asked. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm worried about a lot of things, Dr. Harlow. We're a long way from help if anything goes wrong." That afternoon, as I examined new sections of the ice core, I discovered something the others had missed. Microscopic channels running through the ice surrounding the organic inclusion. Too regular to be natural formations. It was as though the ancient organism had been slowly altering its environment, even while frozen. I decided to keep this observation to myself until I had more data. That night, the dreams returned, more vivid than before. This time, I wasn't merely observed, I was enveloped, probed, my memories sifted through by something both curious and hungry. I felt it learning from me, about all of us. And I sensed its anticipation. Over the next week, strange occurrences multiplied throughout the station. The communications array began picking up anomalous signals, bursts of static that, when analyzed, contained patterns too regular to be random noise. Bennett spent hours trying to trace their origin without success. "It's like they're coming from everywhere and nowhere," he told me, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "And here's the really weird part. Some of the patterns match our own outgoing transmissions from days ago, but distorted somehow." Griffin reported increasing power fluctuations despite his best efforts to stabilize the system. Equipment would activate without human input, especially in the labs where Hayes kept his cultures. Security camera footage would show static at random intervals, always for exactly 108 seconds. Most concerning were the physical symptoms affecting the team. Headaches became common, particularly among those working closely with the ice samples. Several researchers reported vivid dreams similar to my own, sensations of being observed, evaluated, studied by something ancient and patient. "It's just the isolation and winter darkness," Foster insisted during a medical checkup. "Seasonal affective disorder combined with the stress of close quarters living. I'm seeing it in everyone to some degree." But I noticed she had doubled her own caffeine intake, as though afraid to sleep. Hayes grew increasingly obsessed with the organism he'd cultured from the ice core. He began spending nights in the lab, his meals forgotten as he documented the specimen's development. When he did interact with the team, his conversation inevitably circled back to his research, his eyes feverish with excitement. "It's developing neural structures," he confided in me one evening, voice low as though sharing a secret. "Primitive, but unmistakable. A frozen microorganism shouldn't be capable of this level of adaptation." I asked to see his research notes, concerned by his intensity. What I found alarmed me. Beyond the expected scientific observations were pages of personal notes documenting his dreams, remarkably similar to my own. More disturbing were the margins filled with the same phrase repeated dozens of times: "It wants out." The following day, I discreetly took samples from the original core location and examined them in a separate lab. The results confirmed my fears. The microscopic channels I'd observed earlier had expanded, forming an intricate network throughout the surrounding ice. Whatever this organism was, it wasn't contained to the extracted sample. It had been slowly spreading through the glacial layer for who knows how long. Before I could report my findings, disaster struck. A massive storm descended on the station with unprecedented fury, winds exceeding 100 miles per hour, battering our structures and dropping temperatures to lethal levels. The communications array was damaged in the initial blast, severing our already tenuous connection to the outside world. "Meteorologically impossible," Reyes insisted, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "There was no indication of this system forming. It's like it appeared out of nowhere, centered perfectly over the station." Bennett worked frantically to establish emergency communications, jury-rigging equipment with Griffin's help. After hours of effort, they managed to send out an emergency pulse transmission, only to receive an immediate response that chilled us more than the storm outside. "It's sending back our own distress call," Bennett said, face pale as he played the recording. "But it's from 3 days ago, before the storm hit. That's impossible." The garbled message was unmistakably Bennett's voice, calling for emergency evacuation due to severe storm conditions, a message he had never sent. As the team argued over possible explanations, I slipped away to check on Hayes, who had been conspicuously absent during the crisis. I found him in his lab, hunched over his microscope, utterly oblivious to the emergency. "Hayes," I called from the doorway. "We need everyone in the common area. The storm's damaged the communications array." He didn't look up. "It's communicating with me," he whispered. "Through patterns in its cellular structure, mathematical sequences that repeat and evolve." I approached cautiously, noting how he'd disconnected the lab cameras. "What's communicating, Benjamin?" "The ice." He finally turned to face me, and I had to suppress a gasp. His skin was pallid, with strange bluish mottling around his eyes and neck. But it was his expression that truly frightened me. A look of rapturous wonder mixed with fear. "It's been waiting so long, Elias. Waiting for someone to notice it. To free it." "You need medical attention," I said, reaching for the wall communicator. His hand shot out with surprising strength, stopping me. "Don't, she'll lock it away. Lock me away. You don't understand yet, but you will." His eyes, bloodshot and dilated, searched mine. "Haven't you felt it in your dreams, reaching out?" Before I could respond, the lab plunged into darkness as the main power failed completely. In the sudden pitch black, Hayes' grip on my wrist tightened painfully. "It's coming," he whispered, his voice suddenly different, deeper, resonant in a way that made my skin crawl. "It's already here." The emergency lights activated moments later, casting the lab in an eerie red glow. Hayes had vanished. I hurried back to the common area where the team was already implementing emergency protocols. I pulled Winslow aside and reported my encounter with Hayes. "I was afraid of this," she said grimly. "Foster noted behavioral changes 3 days ago. We need to find him, now." We organized search parties, no one to go alone. Bennett and I took the research wing, moving carefully through the dimly lit corridors. The storm howled around the station, the structure creaking under its assault. "I don't like this," Bennett muttered as we checked each room. First Sheffield disappears, now Hayes is acting crazy. Something's not right about this place, has been from the start. We found Hayes unconscious in the cold storage room, curled in a corner without proper insulation gear, yet showing no signs of hypothermia despite the sub-zero temperature. Most alarming were the strange patterns on his exposed skin, intricate, frost-like markings that didn't melt under our touch. Dr. Foster placed him under observation in the medical bay, drawing blood samples that revealed disturbing anomalies, crystalline structures unlike anything in medical literature multiplying within his bloodstream. "Quarantine protocols in effect as of now," Winslow announced after reviewing Foster's preliminary report. "No one works alone, regular medical checks for everyone, and the ice core samples are off limits pending further investigation." That night, the entire station was awakened by Hayes' screams. Raw, animalistic sounds that cut off abruptly. Foster found him awake but unresponsive, staring at the ceiling with unseeing eyes, occasionally muttering in what sounded like multiple voices overlapping. When he did speak coherently, his words sent chills through the team. "The ice is thin between worlds," he said in a monotone, never blinking. "It has tasted us now. It remembers the taste of warmth." For the next 3 days, we operated in emergency mode. Griffin worked continuously to restore full power and repair communications. Reyes monitored the storm, which showed no signs of abating and defied all normal weather patterns. Foster divided her time between caring for Hayes and checking the rest of us for similar symptoms. I continued my research in secret, examining the ice samples away from the main lab. The microscopic channels had developed further, creating patterns that reminded me unsettlingly of neural networks. When placed near living tissue, a scraping of my own skin cells, the channels oriented toward it, as though sensing its presence. On the 4th day of the storm, the impossible happened. The supply helicopter arrived. No aircraft should have been able to fly in those conditions, yet we clearly heard rotors approaching. Griffin rushed to the landing pad controls, bewildered. "They're showing authorized landing codes," he reported, "but McMurdo swears they didn't dispatch anyone." The security camera showed only swirling snow, then brief glimpses of what appeared to be standard Antarctic research equipment being unloaded. No personnel were visible. "Security breach," Winslow ordered. "Full lockdown now." We sealed the internal doors, but hours later, the new equipment was found in the drilling room. Advanced boring tools that none of us had requisitioned, yet each piece marked with our project's identification codes. "Someone brought this in while we were distracted by haze," Nakamura suggested. "Or something," Reyes whispered, voicing what we'd all begun to fear. The following morning, Griffin didn't report for breakfast. Winslow immediately organized a search. Bennett and I checked the maintenance tunnels while others took different sections of the station. We found Griffin's tool belt and tablet near an access panel to the ice shelf below the station. The panel had been removed, revealing a narrow tunnel extending downward that wasn't on any station schematics. "That's not possible," Bennett said, shining his light into the darkness. "This area is solid ice. It would take days to cut through, even with thermal equipment." We reported our discovery to Winslow, who ordered everyone to return to the common area immediately. By unanimous decision, an exploration team consisting of myself, Bennett, and Nakamura was assembled to investigate the tunnel, while the others maintained security in the main station. The passage descended at a sharp angle, clearly artificial but constructed with tools we couldn't identify. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and unnaturally warm to the touch. After descending about 30 meters, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber that appeared to have been hollowed out of the ice shelf. Our headlamps revealed the horror within. Griffin's body, half embedded in the far wall, ice formations growing from his exposed flesh like crystalline veins. His eyes were open, frost-covered, yet seemed to track our movements. "Is he?" Bennett couldn't finish the question. Nakamura approached cautiously, checking for vital signs. "No pulse, no respiration, but the tissue hasn't begun decomposing despite being here at least 24 hours. As we documented the scene with shaking hands, I noticed the ice surrounding Griffin's body was different. Not the clear blue of ancient glacier, but a milky, almost organic-looking substance that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. "We need to get out of here," I urged, backing toward the tunnel entrance. "Now." A low vibration began around us, the chamber walls resonating like a struck bell. Fine ice crystals rained down as the frequency increased. "Run," Nakamura shouted as a crack appeared in the wall beside Griffin's body. We scrambled back through the tunnel, the vibrations growing stronger behind us. I was last to emerge into the station proper, Bennett and Nakamura pulling me through as the tunnel entrance collapsed in a shower of ice. Winslow ordered immediate evacuation preparations after viewing our footage. Whatever was happening at Station 16 had progressed beyond our ability to control or study safely. "The storm's intensity is decreasing," Reyes reported, offering the first good news in days. "Another 24 hours and we might be able to get airlift." As we gathered supplies and prepared emergency equipment, Foster reported from the medical bay. Hayes had disappeared. "How does a sedated patient just vanish from a locked medical bay?" Winslow demanded as we reviewed the security footage. The cameras showed Hayes lying motionless on his bed, the frost patterns on his skin now covering most of his visible body. At 3:47 a.m., the video briefly distorted. When the image stabilized 10 seconds later, the bed was empty, the restraints neatly undone. "Check all exterior doors," Winslow ordered. "If he's gone outside without protection, we need to find him quickly." All exits remained sealed, the security logs showing no activity. Hayes was still somewhere in the station. During evacuation preparations, the power failed completely. The backup generators engaged, but provided only emergency lighting and minimal life support. In the darkness, we heard movement through the ventilation system, scraping sounds that moved faster than any human could navigate the narrow ducts. When emergency lighting stabilized, we discovered 3 more team members missing: Dr. Reyes, Dr. Foster, and a research assistant. Their quarters showed signs of struggle, upended furniture, personal items scattered across the floor, and most disturbing, a thick layer of frost covering every surface despite the rooms maintaining normal temperature. The remaining team, Winslow, Bennett, Nakamura, myself, and 2 assistants, barricaded ourselves in the control room, the most secure location with independent power and communications capabilities. This was never just a research station, was it? I confronted Winslow as we secured the door. What aren't you telling us? For a long moment, she said nothing, her expression torn between professional reserve and growing fear. Finally, she entered a complex code into her secure tablet and pulled up classified files. 30 years ago, a Soviet drilling expedition disappeared at this exact location, she began, her voice clinical despite the circumstances. When an American team investigated, they found evidence of something preserved in the ice, something that had affected the Soviet researchers before they vanished. The files showed grainy photographs of an earlier, more primitive station. Close-ups displayed strange formations and ice core samples, remarkably similar to what we'd discovered. Rather than attempt removal, which was deemed too hazardous, the site was classified and periodically monitored to ensure containment. She looked at each of us in turn. Station 16 was never primarily a research facility. It was a monitoring station built to ensure whatever was down there stayed dormant. And you brought us here as what? Canaries in the coal mine? Bennett's voice shook with anger. Your research was genuine, Winslow insisted, but yes, it served dual purposes. Regular drilling provided samples that could be checked for signs of activity. A horrible realization dawned on me. We didn't accidentally disturb it, I said slowly. The drilling was intentional. We weren't extracting samples to study the past. We were confirming the containment was intact. Nakamura finished, his usual calm demeanor cracking. Until we drilled too deep. The depth was carefully calculated, Winslow argued. We never should have reached the organism's level, unless it was rising, I concluded. Those channels I found in the ice, it's been slowly migrating upward for years, maybe decades. A heavy thud against the barricaded door interrupted our revelation. Then another, harder this time. The reinforced frame groaned under the impact. It found us, one of the assistants whispered. Winslow moved quickly to a concealed panel behind the communications array, revealing a small safe. Protocol Omega, she explained as she entered another code. Last resort containment. The facility is wired with charges at structural weak points, enough to collapse the entire station into the crevasse below. The pounding at the door intensified, the metal beginning to deform with each impact. That's not possible, Bennett gasped. The door is rated for. I don't think we're dealing with physics as we understand it anymore, Nakamura said quietly. The safe opened, revealing a simple detonator. As Winslow reached for it, the ventilation grate above her head burst open. Something grabbed her, too fast to see clearly, and dragged her screaming into the narrow duct. Bennett lunged for the fallen detonator, but the door finally gave way before he could reach it. What entered wasn't human, not anymore. Hayes, or what had once been Hayes, stood in the shattered doorway. His body had elongated impossibly, limbs too thin and jointed in too many places. His skin had the translucent quality of glacier ice, blue veins visible beneath the surface that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Behind him stood Dr. Foster and Reyes, similarly transformed but to lesser degrees, their expressions blank yet somehow hungry. We've been waiting for you, Hayes said, his voice overlapping with others, dozens of others, speaking in unison from one throat. For anyone, for so long. I backed away, pulling Nakamura with me toward the emergency escape hatch that led to the vehicle bay. Bennett, showing remarkable courage, lunged for the detonator, grabbing it before turning to follow us. We merely wish communion. The thing that had been Hayes continued, advancing with jerky, inhuman movements, as we had with those who came before, as we will have with all, once we're free. Nakamura stumbled, and I pulled him through the hatch after me. Bennett was steps behind when Hayes moved, faster than seemed possible, seizing him by the throat. Run, Bennett choked out, thrusting the detonator into my hands as the transformed researchers began to envelope him, ice-like structures growing from their bodies to his. I sealed the hatch, Nakamura and I fleeing down the narrow maintenance corridor toward the vehicle bay. Behind us, inhuman shrieks echoed through the metal passageways, punctuated by a sound like cracking ice. The station had become a nightmare landscape. Ice formations grew from the walls like veins in a living organism, pulsing with the same bioluminescent light we'd seen in haze. The temperature had plummeted despite the environmental controls, our breath fogging heavily before us. "What's the plan?" Nakamura gasped as we reached the vehicle bay. "The snowcat," I decided, pointing to the large tracked vehicle designed for polar conditions. "It has satellite communication equipment independent of the station. If we can reach the emergency weather station at Junction Point, it's about 40 miles south." "What about the others?" Nakamura asked, already knowing the answer. I clutched the detonator. "I don't think there are any others anymore." We loaded the snowcat with emergency supplies, food, extra fuel, medical kits. As I started the engine, Nakamura suddenly seized my arm, pointing toward the bay window. Outside, in the floodlit yard, stood all our missing colleagues: Winslow, Hayes, Foster, Reyes, Griffin, and the assistants, their transformed bodies arranged in a perfect circle, faces upturned to the storm above. Ice grew from them like external skeletons, connecting them to each other into the ground in a grotesque lattice. Most terrifying was their movement, perfectly synchronized as they swayed slightly, broadcasting some silent signal into the storm above. "They're calling to it," Nakamura whispered. "Whatever it is, they're becoming part of it, telling it where to find us." I gunned the snowcat's engine, crashing through the bay doors onto the Antarctic shelf. The storm had calmed to mere gale force winds, navigable in our vehicle but still deadly to any exposed flesh. In the side mirror, I watched as the transformed researchers turned in unison to track our escape, then began moving with that same impossible speed across the ice. "They're following," Nakamura warned, watching through the rear window. I reached into my pocket, clutching the detonator. Station 16 was still visible behind us, its lights flickering as the entity continued to consume its power systems. "I'm sorry," I whispered, thinking of Bennett's sacrifice, then pressed the trigger. The explosion was oddly muted in the vast whiteness, but the shockwave still rocked our vehicle. Behind us, Research Station 16 collapsed in sections, primary charges triggering secondary explosions as fuel tanks and compressed gas canisters detonated. The ice shelf itself seemed to shudder, a massive crack racing outward from the destruction. "Did that stop them?" Nakamura asked anxiously. Through swirling snow I glimpsed movement, figures still advancing despite the destruction, their glowing forms weaving between ice fragments with determined purpose. "Drive faster," I urged, pushing the snowcat's engine beyond safety parameters. As we crested a ridge, I looked back one final time. What I saw will haunt me until my death. The entity had shed all pretense of human form. Where the station had been, the ice itself was rising, reshaping into something vast and incomprehensible, a crystalline structure that pulsed with internally generated light, growing rapidly as it consumed the remains of the station and the transformed researchers who had been its first converts. "Don't look back," I told Nakamura, "just drive." For hours we pushed through the Antarctic night, the storm intensifying again as though pursuing us specifically. The temperature gauge showed external conditions well below survivable limits, the vehicle's heaters struggling to maintain cabin temperature. 10 miles from Junction Point, the engine began to fail, fuel lines freezing despite their insulation. We were forced to continue on foot, donning the extreme weather gear stored in the emergency compartment. The wind shrieked around us, driving ice particles that cut like tiny knives through any exposed skin. Visibility dropped to mere feet, forcing us to rely on GPS that flickered unreliably in the electromagnetic interference that had followed us from the station. Something was coming. I could feel it in the air, a pressure against my skin that had nothing to do with the deadly Antarctic cold. Nakamura stumbled beside me, his breath labored through his face covering. "We need to rest," he gasped, collapsing to one knee in the snow. "We can't stop," I insisted, helping him up. "It's still following us." The storm parted momentarily, giving us a clear view behind. The horizon glowed with pulsing blue-white light where Station 16 had been, a light that should have been impossible to see at this distance. Worse, dark shapes moved across the white plain between us and that glow, impossibly fast, leaving trails of crystalline formations in their wake. "They're gaining," Nakamura whispered. The Junction Point weather station appeared through the blizzard, a small automated facility perched on a rocky outcropping. Its communication array represented our only hope for rescue. We were 50 yards from safety when Nakamura screamed. I turned to see him sinking into the snow, which wasn't snow at all anymore, but a liquid-like substance that clung to him with deliberate purpose. The white surface around us began to bubble and shift, forming into half-realized shapes that reached upward with hunger. "Go," Nakamura shouted, already waist-deep in the consuming mass. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them not to come back." I made a desperate lunge for him, but the ground between us transformed completely, becoming a writhing barrier of ice tendrils that snapped at my outstretched hand. Nakamura's expression was oddly peaceful as the substance covered his chest, then his neck. "It's beautiful on the inside," he said, his last words before the ice claimed him completely. I ran, abandoning everything but the emergency transmitter I'd strapped to my chest. The weather station's door was locked, but in my desperation, I smashed through the reinforced glass window, tumbling inside as the animate ice surged against the building's foundations. With shaking hands, I activated the emergency beacon and broadcast the override code Winslow had given me before everything went wrong. The ancient radio equipment hummed to life, connecting to the McMurdo emergency channel. "This is Dr. Elias Harlow at Junction Point." I gasped into the microphone. "Research Station 16 is gone. Everyone's dead. There's something in the ice. It's alive. It's hunting us. Send extraction immediately." The radio crackled with static before a response came through. "Dr. Harlow, this is McMurdo Control. Report your status and nature of emergency." Before I could respond, the building shuddered violently. Through the broken window, I saw ice crystals forming in accelerated patterns across the glass, creating those same neural-like networks I'd observed in the samples. "The ice shelf is destabilizing," I reported, watching in horror as the structure around me began to crack. "I need immediate extraction. There's something here, something that's been trapped in the ice for millions of years. We woke it up." The radio operator's tone changed, becoming more urgent. "Remain at Junction Point. Rescue team is being dispatched. ETA 12 hours. I laughed bitterly. "I don't have 12 hours. It's already here." The walls groaned as ice expanded within the metal framework, warping the structure from within. Outside, the storm intensified again, but with purpose now, the wind and snow moving in coordinated patterns around the building like a sentient thing testing its defenses. "It followed me from the station," I continued, my voice shaking. "It can control the ice, reshape it. It took the others, changed them somehow. They're part of it now." The temperature in the room plummeted suddenly, my breath crystallizing instantly before my face. The radio hissed with interference, the operator's response breaking up. "Losing your signal. Repeat your B position." Through the window, I saw them, the transformed researchers, no longer even remotely human. Their bodies had merged into the ice itself, moving as projections of the greater entity that controlled them. Hayes, or what remained of him, pressed against the glass, his face elongated and features smoothed into an expressionless mask. Only his eyes remained recognizable, watching me with cold intelligence. In desperation, I searched the small station for anything I could use as a weapon. In a storage locker, I found emergency flares and a small canister of chemical fire suppressant. Useless against the cold, but the flares might buy me time. As the entity began to infiltrate through cracks in the weather station's structure, I made my last transmission. "This is my final report from Antarctic Research Station 16. Whatever we found in the ice is ancient beyond reckoning. It hibernated for millennia until our drilling disturbed it. It consumes and converts organic matter, reshaping it to extend itself. It learns from what it absorbs. It's already learned so much from us. The ice around Station 16 is compromised for miles in every direction. Do not send people here. Quarantine this entire region. If anyone receives this message, burn everything." The radio died as ice crystals formed across its circuits. The door bulged inward as enormous pressure built behind it. I ignited a flare, the sudden heat and light causing the nearest ice formations to recoil temporarily. In that moment of reprieve, I noticed a steel hatch in the floor, access to the station's emergency shelter, stocked with supplies for situations when the main structure was compromised. I pulled it open and descended quickly, securing the hatch behind me. The shelter was little more than a reinforced box set into the bedrock below the ice shelf, with enough provisions for a week and an independent power supply. Most importantly, it contained a secondary emergency transponder designed to penetrate even the worst storm interference. Above me, I heard the weather station collapse with a tortured shriek of metal, then silence, save for a subtle crystalline tinkling, like the sound of growing ice. I activated the transponder, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. Mayday, Mayday, this is Dr. Elias Harlow. Research Station 16 destroyed. Extreme biological hazard. Requesting immediate extraction. For 6 hours, I huddled in that shelter as the temperature dropped impossibly low despite the heating system running at maximum capacity. Ice began to form on the inside of the reinforced walls, not through any breach, but spontaneously generating on surfaces that should have been too warm. When the rescue helicopter finally arrived, I was nearly unconscious from hypothermia despite my protective gear. The ice had formed a perfect dome over the shelter entrance, but the rescue team, bless their training, had infrared equipment that detected my body heat below. They used thermal charges to melt through. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the medic's shocked expression as they pulled me from the shelter. Later, he told me he'd never seen anyone alive with that degree of cold exposure. That was 3 weeks ago. I've been recovering at McMurdo Station's medical facility since then, treated for extreme hypothermia and frostbite that claimed 2 fingers and part of my left ear. The doctors say I'm lucky to be alive. They don't understand that survival might be my curse. The official investigation dismissed most of my account. They found no trace of Research Station 16 when they sent drones to survey the site. Just a collapsed section of ice shelf and a newly formed crevasse a mile deep. No bodies were recovered. No evidence of the entity I described. Traumatic hallucinations, the psychological evaluation concluded, consistent with extreme isolation, exposure, and survivor's guilt. They're sending me back to the mainland tomorrow. The incident has been classified as a tragic accident, structural failure of an ice shelf research station during an unprecedented polar storm, 7 deaths and 1 missing person. But I know the truth. Sometimes, during the night when the medications wear off, I feel a familiar presence at the edges of my consciousness, patient, curious, learning, waiting. The doctors are concerned by my persistent low body temperature, but they attribute it to lasting effects of the hypothermia. They haven't noticed the small, frost-like patterns that have begun forming on my skin while I sleep, delicate crystalline structures that fade when I warm myself but always return, spreading a little further each night. I've requested reassignment to a tropical research station, as far from ice and cold as possible. Perhaps distance will weaken whatever connection has been established. Perhaps heat will kill what grows inside me. But in my dreams, I still see it. The vast intelligence stirring beneath the Antarctic ice, expanding through networks we can barely comprehend. I feel its thoughts, alien yet increasingly articulate as it absorbs and processes what it learned from us. Sometimes I hear the voices of my colleagues, their consciousness preserved within its expanding awareness like insects in amber. They think the danger is contained because the station is gone, but it's just waiting, and I can feel it spreading inside me. Whatever you do, don't let them send another team. Don't let them drill a